The desperate signal. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but Dr. Sarah Chen barely noticed. Her eyes remained fixed on the cascade of data flowing across multiple screens in the Kepler Deep Space Array control room. As Earth's premier xenolinguist and the lead researcher for the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, she had spent the last 5 years listening to cosmic silence. Tonight, that silence had finally broken. The signal had arrived 3 hours ago, buried in the background radiation from the Andromeda sector. At first, Sarah thought it might be another pulsar or distant quasar, but the mathematical patterns were too precise, too intentional. Someone or something was trying to communicate across the vast emptiness of space. "Computer, run pattern analysis 7 alpha," Sarah commanded, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface, the artificial intelligence that managed. The array's systems responded immediately, its synthesized voice filling the quiet room. "Analysis complete, Dr. Chen. The signal shows characteristics of artificial origin with 97% certainty. Linguistic patterns suggest an attempt at mathematical communication, followed by what appears to be emotional distress markers." Sarah's heart raced. After decades of searching, humanity had finally received proof that they were not alone. But this wasn't the peaceful greeting that scientists had always hoped for. The emotional distress markers suggested desperation, fear, perhaps even a cry for help. She initiated the emergency contact protocol, sending alerts to every major space agency and government on Earth. Within 30 minutes, her small laboratory was buzzing with activity as experts from around the world joined via holographic conference. The implications were staggering, but the urgency in the signal couldn't be ignored. Dr. James Harrison, Earth's leading expert in space warfare theory, studied the translated portions of the message with growing concern. His weathered face reflected years of military service before he'd turned to academic research. "If this translation is accurate, we're looking at a civilization under attack. They're calling themselves the Zephyrian Republic, and they're being systematically destroyed by something called the Dominion Empire." The debate that followed lasted 6 hours. Some argued for caution, suggesting that humanity wasn't ready for contact with advanced alien civilizations. Others worried about the military implications of getting involved in an interstellar war. But as more of the message was decoded, the moral imperative became clear. The Zephyrians weren't just asking for help. They were dying. Entire worlds had been conquered. Billions of innocent beings enslaved or killed. The Dominion Empire was a force of pure aggression, expanding across the galaxy and consuming everything in its path. Most disturbing of all, the message indicated that the Zephyrians had heard legends about a species called Void Walkers, beings from the edge of known space, who might be capable of fighting the Dominion. General Patricia Valdez, head of Earth's United Defense Council, made the final decision. She was a career soldier who had spent her life preparing for threats that might never come. Now, faced with the greatest threat in human history, she knew what had to be done. "We respond," she announced to the assembled leaders, "not because it's politically convenient or because we're certain of victory, but because it's right. If we want to have a place in this galaxy, we need to show that Earth stands for something beyond our own survival." The mobilization began immediately. Earth's space fleet was small compared to interstellar empires, but it represented the pinnacle of human engineering. 12 heavy cruisers, 36 destroyers, and dozens of support vessels were prepared for humanity's first journey beyond the solar system. More importantly, 20,000 of Earth's finest soldiers, pilots, and engineers volunteered for a mission they might not survive. Captain Marcus Rivera stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, Earth's newest and most advanced warship. At 42, he was young for a fleet commander, but his service record was flawless. He had fought in the Mars Independence War, led rescue missions during the Europa crisis, and trained in combat scenarios that most people couldn't imagine. Now he faced the ultimate test of human courage and ingenuity. The captain studied the star charts showing their destination. The Andromeda sector was 47 light-years from Earth, farther than any human had ever traveled. The journey would take 3 weeks through hyperspace, assuming their experimental faster-than-light drives functioned correctly. If they failed, the fleet would be stranded in deep space with no way home. Lieutenant Commander Elena Vasquez, Rivera's tactical officer, reviewed the intelligence they had gathered from the Zephyrian message. The Dominion forces are massive, she reported. Conservative estimates suggest they have over 500 ships in the target system. We'll be outnumbered 12-1, assuming our weapons are even effective against their technology. Rivera nodded grimly. Earth's military doctrine had always been based on fighting against superior numbers. Humanity had learned to win through intelligence, adaptability, and sheer determination, rather than overwhelming force. This would be the ultimate test of those principles. The fleet departed Earth's moon base in a ceremony watched by 4 billion people. For the first time in human history, their military was leaving the solar system to fight for someone else's freedom. The symbolic weight of the moment wasn't lost on anyone aboard the ships. They carried humanity's hopes and fears into the unknown. As the Indomitable entered hyperspace, Rivera walked through the ship's corridors talking with his crew. These men and women had volunteered knowing they might never see Earth again. They came from every nation and background, united by the belief that some things were worth fighting for regardless of the personal cost. Sergeant First Class Maria Santos was checking equipment in the Marine Bay when Rivera found her. She was a veteran of 3 conflicts, known for her ability to lead soldiers through impossible situations. Her squad looked up to her with the kind of respect that couldn't be commanded, only earned. "How are your people holding up, Sergeant?" Rivera asked. Santos looked up from the plasma rifle she was cleaning. "They're scared, sir, but they're ready. Most of them have never been outside the solar system, let alone into combat against aliens. But they know what we're fighting for. That makes all the difference." In the engineering section, Chief Petty Officer David Kim worked frantically to optimize the ship's systems for combat in unknown conditions. His team had spent months preparing for scenarios they could only guess at. Alien technology, different. Physics, weapons they had never seen. All of it would require human adaptability and creativity to overcome. "The power systems are running at optimal efficiency," Kim reported to Rivera. "But honestly, sir, we have no idea what we're going to face out there. Our shields and weapons were designed to fight other human ships. Against alien technology, we're basically improvising." Rivera clapped the engineer on the shoulder. "That's what humans do best, Chief. We improvise, we adapt, and we find a way to win when everyone else says it's impossible." The journey through hyperspace was unlike anything the crew had experienced. The space between dimensions was filled with swirling colors and patterns that seemed to respond to human consciousness. Some crew members reported strange dreams, visions, of vast battles and ancient civilizations. Others felt a sense of connection to something larger than themselves, as if the universe itself was aware of their mission. Dr. Sarah Chen had joined the expedition to serve as humanity's first alien contact specialist. During the long journey, she worked tirelessly to decode more of the Zephyrian message. What she discovered both fascinated and terrified her. The Zephyrians were an ancient species, far older than humanity. They had built a civilization based on art, science, and peaceful exploration. For millennia, they had believed that intelligence and wisdom were the highest achievements any species could reach. The Dominion Empire had shattered that belief with brutal efficiency. "They're not warriors," Sarah explained to Rivera during one of their strategy sessions. "The Zephyrians are explorers and philosophers. They build things to last for thousands of years, create art that spans generations. The concept of total war is completely alien to them. That's why they're losing so badly." The Dominion, by contrast, was everything the Zephyrians were not. They were a species that had evolved for conquest, turning warfare into a science of domination. Their empire stretched across dozens of star systems built on the bones of conquered civilizations. They enslaved those who could work and eliminated those who couldn't. As the fleet neared its destination, long-range sensors began detecting the signs of massive space battles. Energy signatures from weapons that could shatter planets, the debris, fields of destroyed fleets, the electromagnetic chaos of orbital bombardments. The war was still raging, which meant the Zephyrians were still fighting despite overwhelming odds. Rivera called all department heads to the bridge for the final briefing. Through the main view screen, they could see the distant flashes of weapons fire lighting up the darkness between stars. Somewhere in that chaos, an entire civilization was making its last stand against extinction. First contact and alliance. The first alien voice that humanity ever heard was filled with desperation and fading hope. It came through the communication array of the UES Indomitable as Captain Rivera's fleet moved closer to the massive space battle raging in the inner system. Unknown vessels, this is Commander Lyrix of the Zephyrian Republic Defense Force. If you are receiving this transmission, please respond. We are in critical need of assistance. Our civilization is dying, and we have nowhere else to turn. Doctor. Sarah Chen worked frantically at her translation matrix, converting the alien language into something humans could understand. The mathematical foundations were surprisingly similar to Earth languages, suggesting that intelligence followed certain universal patterns regardless of species origin. This is Captain Marcus Rivera of the Earth Defense Fleet, Rivera responded, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. We received your distress signal and traveled 47 light-years to offer assistance. What is your current tactical situation? The pause that followed lasted several seconds. When the alien voice returned, it carried a tone of disbelief, mixed with desperate hope. Earth? The legendary homeworld of the Voidwalkers? We thought your species was nothing more than myth. Please, if you are real, we need your help immediately. The Dominion is about to launch their final assault on our homeworld. Rivera exchanged glances with his officers. The term Voidwalkers was new to them, but the reverence in the alien's voice suggested that humanity had somehow gained a reputation among the stars, despite never leaving their solar system. Commander Lyrix's ship was a graceful vessel that looked more like a work of art than a weapon of war. Its hull was comprised of flowing curves and crystalline surfaces that caught and reflected the light of distant stars. When it approached the human fleet, the contrast between the two technological philosophies was immediately apparent. Human ships were built for function over form, with angular armor plating, redundant systems, and weapon hardpoints that could be quickly reconfigured for different threats. They looked dangerous because they were designed by a species that had learned to fight for survival on a world that was constantly trying to kill them. The first meeting between species took place aboard the Indomitable. Commander Lyrix was tall and slender, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. His large eyes were adapted for low-light conditions, and his movements were graceful, but carried an underlying tension that spoke of months of desperate warfare. Your ships, Lyrix said as he looked around the human vessel's bridge. They are built for war, not exploration, not trade, but combat. I had heard stories that Voidwalkers came from harsh worlds, but I never understood what that truly meant. Until now. Dr. Chen served as translator and cultural liaison, her years of studying xenolinguistics finally proving their worth. Commander, can you explain what you mean by Voidwalkers? This is the first time humans have heard that term. Lyrix's expression showed surprise, then understanding. The stories have been passed down for generations among spacefaring species. They speak of beings from the edge of known space, from worlds so dangerous that they created the fiercest warriors in the galaxy. Worlds where survival required constant adaptation, where the environment itself was an enemy to be conquered daily. Lieutenant. Commander Vasquez pulled up tactical displays showing the Dominion fleet. Commander, we need to understand what we're facing. Our sensors indicate over 400 enemy vessels, many of them larger than anything in our fleet. What are their capabilities? The Zephyrian leader's face darkened as he studied the human displays. The Dominion Empire has conquered 17 civilizations over the past century. They are a species that evolved for warfare, turning conquest into both art and science. Their ships are heavily armed and well defended, but more importantly, they fight with complete coordination and tactical precision. He activated a holographic display that showed the progression of the war. System after system had fallen to Dominion forces over the past 6 months. The pattern was always the same. Overwhelming force applied with surgical precision, civilian populations enslaved or eliminated, resources stripped and sent back to the Empire's core worlds. They call themselves the hegemony, Lyrix continued. Each world they conquer strengthens their military machine, We estimate they have over 2,000 ships spread across their empire, with more being constructed constantly using slave labor from conquered species. Captain Rivera studied the tactical information with the eye of a career military officer. The Dominion's strategy was sound from a purely military perspective, but it lacked the flexibility that human commanders prized. Their formations were rigid, their responses predictable, their tactics based on overwhelming superiority rather than adaptation. "What about your own forces?" Rivera asked. "What capabilities do the Zephyrians bring to this fight?" Lyrics activated another display showing Zephyrian technology. Their ships were marvels of engineering, equipped with sensors that could detect objects across entire star systems and communication arrays that functioned instantaneously across interstellar distances. Their shields were nearly impenetrable when properly maintained, and their energy weapons were precisely calibrated for maximum efficiency. "Our technology is advanced," Lyrics admitted, "but we are not warriors. The Zephyrian Republic has existed in peace for over 3,000 years. We build our ships for exploration and research, not conquest. When the Dominion first attacked, we couldn't believe that an intelligent species would choose destruction over cooperation." Dr. Chen found this cultural information fascinating. "Commander, how did your species develop such advanced technology without military applications?" "We learned to work together," Lyrics replied simply. "When faced with problems, we found solutions through collaboration and patience. The idea of using technology to harm other intelligent beings was incomprehensible to us until the Dominion arrived." This cultural difference explained why the Zephyrians were losing despite their technological advantages. They had the tools to fight, but lacked the mindset necessary for total war. The Dominion, by contrast, had turned warfare into their primary, evolutionary advantage. Rivera saw an opportunity in this mismatch. "Commander, what if we combined your technology with our tactical knowledge? Human military doctrine is based on asymmetric warfare, winning against superior enemies through unpredictable tactics and superior adaptability." The next several hours were spent in intense planning sessions. Human officers worked with Zephyrian engineers to understand each other's capabilities and limitations. The cultural exchange was as important as the military cooperation, as both species learned that intelligence could take many different forms. Chief Kim and his engineering team were amazed by Zephyrian technology. Their power systems were elegant and efficient, producing massive amounts of energy with no waste products. Their materials science was centuries ahead of Earth's, creating hulls that were both stronger and lighter than anything humans had developed. "It's incredible," Kim reported to Rivera. "Their ships can generate shield fields that would take our entire fleet's power output, but they've never thought to use those same field generators as weapons. The possibility just never occurred to them." Sergeant Santos worked with Zephyrian security personnel to understand their approach to ground combat. What she found was both impressive and concerning. "They have non-lethal weapons that can incapacitate targets from incredible distances," she told Rivera, "but they've never developed tactics for fighting enemies who want to kill them. The concept of lethal force in defense of others is something they're still struggling with." The first joint operation began when long-range sensors detected a Dominion scouting force approaching their position. 3 heavy cruisers accompanied by a dozen smaller vessels were moving to investigate the appearance of unknown ships in the system. "This is our chance to test combined tactics," Rivera announced to both fleets. "Zephyrian vessels will provide sensor data and electronic warfare support. Human ships will execute the attack using unconventional maneuvers." The battle that followed lasted only 30 minutes, but it changed everything. Human ships moved in patterns that the Dominion commanders couldn't predict or counter. They used the debris fields from previous battles as cover, attacked from unexpected angles, and coordinated their movements in ways that seemed chaotic, but were actually precisely calculated. Meanwhile, Zephyrian ships provided real-time intelligence and communication coordination that allowed the human fleet to operate as a single organism. Their sensors could track every enemy vessel simultaneously, while their communication systems allowed instant coordination across the entire battlefield. The result was devastating for the Dominion force. All 15 enemy ships were destroyed without a single loss among the Allied fleet. More importantly, the battle was observed by sensors throughout the system, including those belonging to the main Dominion fleet. Admiral Corinth commanded the Dominion's main battle fleet from his flagship, the Eternal Dominance. He was a member of the Hegemony's warrior caste, bred for conquest and trained from birth in the art of galactic warfare. He had never lost a battle in 30 years of service, and he had personally overseen the destruction of 4 civilizations. Report from his scouts troubled him deeply. The unknown vessels fight like nothing in our tactical databases, his intelligence officer reported. They move unpredictably, coordinate without apparent communication, and use weapons and tactics we've never encountered. Corinth studied the battle recordings with growing interest. These new ships were smaller than his dreadnoughts, but moved with an agility that seemed to defy physics. Their weapons were primitive by Dominion standards, using kinetic projectiles instead of energy beams, but they were used with devastating effectiveness. Increase reconnaissance efforts, Corinth ordered. I want to know everything about these newcomers before we engage them directly, and prepare the main fleet for immediate deployment. These unknowns may represent a significant threat to our operations. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Indomitable, Rivera and Lyrics were planning their next move. The first battle had been a success, but it had also announced their presence to the entire Dominion fleet. Soon they would face the full might of an empire that had never known defeat. The main Dominion force will move against us within hours, Lyrics warned. Admiral Corinth is their most experienced commander. He has destroyed entire civilizations and never lost a battle. His fleet includes ships that can crack planets and weapons that can sterilize entire star systems. Rivera smiled grimly. Good. That means he's used to winning through superior firepower and overwhelming numbers. Commanders like that often struggle when faced with enemies who don't fight by the established rules. Dr. Chen had been monitoring Dominion communications and intercepting their tactical discussions. Captain, their military doctrine appears to be based on rigid hierarchies and predetermined responses. They have contingency plans for every scenario they've encountered, but they seem incapable of adapting when faced with completely new tactics. This was exactly the kind of enemy that human military doctrine was designed to defeat. Earth's commanders had spent centuries learning to fight against superior forces by being unpredictable, adaptable, and willing to take risks that more cautious enemies wouldn't consider. The combined human-Zephyrian fleet spent the next 12 hours preparing for the coming battle. It would be the largest space engagement in galactic history, and its outcome would determine the fate of both civilizations. The Dominion had numbers and firepower, but the Alliance had something more valuable: the desperate courage of beings fighting for their survival and the homes they loved. The Deathworld Advantage Admiral Corinth's fleet moved through space like a wall of destruction. 400 warships arranged in perfect formation, their hulls bristling with weapons capable of shattering worlds. At the center of the armada, the Eternal Dominance stretched 3 kilometers from bow to stern, its massive frame housing enough firepower to level continents. On the bridge of his flagship, Corinth studied tactical displays showing the positions of the unknown fleet. 47 ships against 400 should have been no contest, but something about these newcomers troubled the veteran commander. His scouts had been destroyed too easily, their wreckage providing few clues about the enemy's true capabilities. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, the unknown vessels are maintaining position near the asteroid belt in the outer system. They appear to be waiting for us to approach. Corinth's reptilian features showed no emotion, but his mind raced through possibilities. In 30 years of conquest, he had learned to recognize traps. This positioning suggested either supreme confidence or desperate foolishness. Given the size disparity between the fleets, foolishness seemed more likely. Deploy scout wings to probe their defenses, Corinth ordered. I want to understand their capabilities before committing the main force. Miles away, aboard the UES Indomitable, Captain Rivera watched the approaching Dominion fleet with calm determination. The human commander had spent his career studying asymmetric warfare, learning to turn disadvantages into strengths. Now he faced the ultimate test of those principles. "All ships, this is Rivera," he announced over the fleet communication channel. "Remember your training. We're not trying to match them, ship for ship. We're going to make them fight our kind of battle on our terms, using tactics they've never encountered." Lieutenant Commander Vasquez coordinated with Commander Lyrix to position their combined forces throughout the asteroid field. The massive rocks floating in space would provide cover and create opportunities for ambush tactics that the rigid Dominion formations couldn't easily counter. "Zephyrian vessels will handle electronic warfare and sensor coordination," Rivera explained to his commanders. "Their technology can blind enemy sensors and coordinate our movements without detectable communication signals. Human ships will focus on hit-and-run attacks, striking fast and disappearing before the enemy can respond effectively." Sergeant Santos led her Marine battalion aboard modified Zephyrian shuttles equipped with human weapons and Earth-trained tactics. Their mission was to capture key Dominion vessels and turn the enemy's own weapons against them. It was incredibly dangerous, but Marines had been performing impossible missions since the concept of military service began. "Remember," Santos told her troops, "these aliens have conquered dozens of civilizations, but they've never fought humans. They don't know what we're capable of when we're protecting something we believe in. Use that surprise to your advantage." The first wave of Dominion scouts entered the asteroid field expecting to find hiding enemies. Instead, they found nothing. Human ships had powered down to minimal signatures and drifted among the rocks like debris. Zephyrian sensor technology made them nearly invisible to enemy detection. When the scouts reported the field empty, Admiral Corinth made his first mistake. Believing the enemy had fled, he ordered his main fleet to advance through the asteroids in standard formation. It was exactly what Rivera had hoped for. The ambush began when Chief Kim activated a series of improvised mines that his engineering teams had attached to asteroids throughout the field. The explosions weren't meant to destroy Dominion ships, but to create chaos and confusion while revealing enemy positions to human targeting systems. Suddenly, the empty asteroid field came alive with human warships. They emerged from hiding spots that shouldn't have been able to conceal vessels of their size, moving at accelerations that should have killed their crews. The Dominion formation found itself under attack from all directions, simultaneously. Captain Helen Park commanded the destroyer UES Defiance in the first wave of attacks. Her ship darted between asteroids at speeds that made her crew fight to remain conscious, but they held together through training and sheer determination. Park targeted the Dominion flagship's escort vessels, knowing that isolating the command ship would disrupt enemy coordination. "Direct hit on enemy cruiser 7, her weapons officer reported. "Their shields are down and they're venting atmosphere." Park smiled grimly. Human weapons might be primitive compared to Dominion technology, but they were designed by engineers who understood that sometimes the simplest solutions were the most effective. Kinetic kill vehicles punched through energy shields by transferring momentum directly to the target's hull. The battle became a three-dimensional chess game played at impossible speeds. Human ships appeared where they couldn't possibly be, attacked from angles that defied tactical logic, and disappeared before enemy weapons could lock onto them. The rigid Dominion formations began to break apart as commanders tried to adapt to threats they had never encountered. Admiral Corinth watched his tactical displays with growing frustration. How are they moving so quickly? Those acceleration rates should be lethal to any known species. His science officer studied the sensor data with confusion. Admiral, their ships are generating gravitational fields that shouldn't be possible with their technology level. It's as if they're ignoring several fundamental laws of physics. What the Dominion commanders didn't understand was that humans had evolved under Earth's heavy gravity. The acceleration that would kill most alien species was merely uncomfortable for human crews. More importantly, human pilots had trained in Earth's chaotic weather patterns and unpredictable environment, learning to make split-second decisions while under extreme physical stress. Lieutenant Sarah Reeves piloted her fighter through a debris field at velocities that made her instruments blur. Behind her, a Dominion interceptor tried desperately to match her maneuvers but couldn't handle the rapid course changes required to navigate through the floating wreckage. "These aliens fly like computers," Reeves reported to her squadron leader. Perfect formation, predictable patterns, but no creativity. They can't adapt when we do something that's not in their programming. The turning point of the battle came when Sergeant Santos successfully led her Marines in boarding the Dominion cruiser, Stellar Conquest. The assault team cut through the enemy hull using modified mining equipment, then fought their way through corridors designed for beings twice their size. The Dominion crew had never faced opponents like human Marines. Santos and her soldiers moved through the alien ship like a pack of predators, using Earth-trained tactics that turned every corner into a potential ambush point. More importantly, they fought with a desperate creativity born from a lifetime of surviving on a world that was constantly trying to kill them. The aliens are strong but inflexible, Santos reported as her team reached the cruiser's bridge. They have standard responses to standard threats, but they don't know how to handle enemies who break the rules. The captured Dominion vessel was turned against its own fleet, its powerful weapons now controlled by human tactical specialists who understood how to use them in ways their original designers never intended. The psychological impact on the Dominion fleet was devastating as they watched their own technology being used against them. Admiral Corinth realized he was facing something unprecedented. These unknown vessels fought with tactics that had no basis in accepted military doctrine. They used their environment as a weapon, turned disadvantages into advantages, and seemed to thrive in the chaos of battle. All ships, fall back to defensive. Formation Beta, Corinth ordered. We need to reassess our enemy before continuing the engagement. But Captain Rivera had no intention of allowing the Dominion fleet to regroup. The human commander understood that their advantages lay in momentum and confusion. Once the enemy had time to analyze their tactics and develop countermeasures, the battle would become much more difficult. All ships, press the attack, Rivera commanded. Don't give them time to think or reorganize. We need to end this while we still have the initiative. The final phase of the battle became a testament to human determination and alien cooperation. Zephyrian ships provided the advanced technology and coordination needed to track hundreds of targets simultaneously, while human vessels delivered the aggressive tactics and desperate courage necessary to close with a superior enemy. Commander, Lyrix coordinated the combined fleet's movements from his ship's advanced command center, his species' natural ability for complex mental calculations allowing him to process battlefield information faster than any computer. Human vessels Delta through Gamma. Enemy formation break detected in Sector 7. Recommend immediate exploitation. The recommendation was unnecessary. Human commanders had already spotted the weakness and were moving to exploit it before Lyrix finished speaking. This kind of intuitive tactical awareness was exactly what made the partnership between species so effective. Dr. Chen monitored Dominion communications throughout the battle, translating their increasingly desperate tactical discussions. Captain, they're starting to panic. Their commanders are requesting permission to withdraw, but Admiral Corinth is refusing to retreat. Rivera understood the enemy's dilemma. The Dominion had built their empire on the assumption of tactical superiority. Admitting defeat against a smaller force would undermine their reputation throughout the galaxy and potentially inspire rebellions on conquered worlds. The decisive moment came when the UES Indomitable, supported by 3 Zephyrian cruisers, made a direct assault on the Eternal Dominance. It was exactly the kind of suicidal attack that no rational military commander would attempt, which was precisely why it succeeded. Rivera brought his ship through a gap in the Dominion formation that should have been impossible to navigate using gravitational slingshot maneuvers around asteroids to achieve velocities that his own engineers said were theoretically impossible. The Indomitable emerged from the asteroid field directly above the enemy flagship, its weapons trained on the massive vessel's command section. "This is Captain Rivera to Admiral Corinth," Rivera announced over an open communication channel. "Your ship is targeted and your fleet is broken. Surrender now or we will demonstrate why Earth is called a death world." Admiral Corinth stared at the human vessel positioned above his flagship. It was smaller than his escort cruisers, its hull scarred by battle damage, but it held position with complete confidence. For the first time in his career, the Dominion commander felt something he had never experienced before, the recognition of defeat. "You fight like demons," Corinth transmitted back. What manner of species are you? We're human, Rivera replied simply, and we don't like bullies. The Dominion fleet began its withdrawal from the system within the hour. Admiral Corinth had enough experience to recognize when continued fighting would result in the complete destruction of his forces. The retreat wasn't orderly or dignified, but it preserved enough ships to prevent the complete collapse of Dominion power in the region. As the enemy vessels disappeared into hyperspace, the combined human-Zephyrian fleet regrouped near the inner planets of the Andromeda system. The victory had been complete, but it had come at a cost. 7 human ships had been destroyed, and hundreds of crew members had given their lives to protect a civilization they had never seen. Commander Lyrix met with Captain Rivera aboard the Indomitable for a final strategy session. The immediate threat had been eliminated, but both commanders understood that the war was far from over. The Dominion will return, Lyrix warned, his pale blue features showing concern. Admiral Corinth will report our tactics to his superiors. They will develop countermeasures and return with overwhelming force. Rivera nodded, studying star charts that showed the full extent of Dominion territory. Then we need to be ready. For them. But more importantly, we need to make sure other species know that the Dominion can be defeated. Fear has been their greatest weapon. Once that's broken, their empire will start to crumble. Dr. Chen had been analyzing data from the battle, studying how human and Zephyrian technologies could be combined more effectively. Captain, I believe we've stumbled onto something revolutionary here. Our species complement each other perfectly. Zephyrian technology provides capabilities we could never develop alone, while human tactics give them the military effectiveness they've always lacked. The implications were staggering. Separately, both species had significant limitations. Together, they represented something new in galactic civilization, a partnership based on mutual respect and complementary strengths, rather than conquest and domination. Over the following weeks, word of the victory spread throughout the galaxy. The Dominion Empire, which had seemed unstoppable for over a century, had been defeated by an alliance of species they had never heard of. More importantly, the battle had been won through cooperation, rather than superior firepower. Captain Park, now commanding the rebuilt destroyer UES Defiance, led diplomatic missions to species throughout the region. Each world that had suffered under Dominion rule sent representatives to learn about the alliance that had accomplished the impossible. The key is not trying to fight them the way they expect, Park explained to a gathering of alien military commanders. The Dominion has spent centuries perfecting their tactics against conventional opponents, but humans didn't develop conventional tactics. We learned to fight on a world that was actively trying to kill us every day. The formation of what became known as the Galactic Freedom Alliance took place on Zephyr Prime, the capital world of the Zephyrian Republic. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss how they could work together to resist Dominion expansion and protect their mutual freedom. General Valdez arrived from Earth aboard the newest human dreadnought, the UES Humanity's Hope. The massive vessel represented Earth's commitment to galactic defense and carried advanced weapon systems developed through human-Zephyrian cooperation. We stand at a crossroads, Valdez announced to the assembled delegates. We can continue to cower in fear of the Dominion, or we can stand together and show the galaxy that freedom is worth fighting for. Earth pledges its full support to any species willing to defend innocent life against tyranny. The alliance that emerged was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of a hierarchical empire based on conquest, it was a voluntary confederation of species that maintained their individual identities while working together for mutual defense and prosperity. Sergeant Santos, now promoted to Major, established training programs that taught alien forces human tactical principles. The courses were incredibly popular, with warriors from dozens of species learning Earth-style combat techniques adapted for their unique physiologies and capabilities. The most important lesson, Santos told her students, is that there's always a way to win if you're willing to think creatively and take calculated risks. The universe is full of rules that seem absolute until someone finds a way around them. Chief Kim led engineering exchanges that revolutionized technology throughout the alliance. Human creativity combined with alien science produced innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. Ships became faster and more efficient, weapons became more precise and effective, and defensive systems reached new levels of sophistication. The Dominion's response came 6 months later. Admiral Corinth returned with a fleet of over 1,000 ships, equipped with new weapons and tactics designed specifically to counter human strategies. The Second Battle of Andromeda would test whether the Alliance could survive against an enemy that had learned from defeat. But the galaxy had changed during those 6 months. The Alliance now included 12 species and over 300 ships, each contributing unique capabilities to the common defense. More importantly, the psychological impact of the first victory had spread throughout Dominion territory, inspiring rebellions on conquered worlds and defections among the Empire's military forces. Captain Rivera, now promoted to admiral, stood on the bridge of the Indomitable as the Dominion fleet approached. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of Alliance vessels commanded by beings from a dozen different worlds, all united in their determination to protect the freedom they had fought so hard to achieve. "This is Admiral Rivera to all Alliance forces," he announced. "6 months ago, we proved that the Dominion could be defeated. Today, we prove that they can be destroyed. For Earth, for Zephyr, for every world that chooses freedom over slavery." The second battle was larger and more complex than the first, involving over 1,300 ships across multiple star systems. But the outcome was never really in doubt. The Alliance had learned to fight as a unified force, combining the strengths of multiple species into something greater than the sum of its parts. When Admiral Corinth's flagship exploded under the combined fire of human kinetic weapons and Zephyrian energy beams, the psychological blow to the Dominion Empire was devastating. Their greatest admiral had been defeated twice by the same enemy, and their military reputation lay in ruins. The war continued for 2 more years, but the tide had turned permanently. One by one, Dominion strongholds fell to Alliance forces. Conquered species rose in rebellion, supported by Alliance advisors and equipment. The empire that had dominated the galaxy for over a century crumbled in less than 3 years. The final battle took place in the Dominion home system, where the last remnants of their fleet made a desperate stand around their capital world. Admiral Rivera led the Alliance assault personally, but by then the outcome was a foregone conclusion. The Dominion had lost not just militarily but morally, their cause undermined by the evidence that cooperation was stronger than conquest. When the surrender finally came, it was broadcast throughout the galaxy. The Dominion Empire formally disbanded, its member species choosing to join the expanding Galactic Freedom Alliance, rather than face continued isolation. The age of conquest was ending, replaced by an era of cooperation and mutual respect. Dr. Chen stood in the observation lounge of the Indomitable, looking out at a galaxy that had been transformed by the courage of beings willing to answer a desperate call for help. Earth's children had traveled farther than any human had ever gone, not for conquest or glory, but simply because someone had asked for help. "It's remarkable," she said to Captain Rivera, who had joined her at the viewport. 3 years ago, humanity was alone in the universe. Now we're part of something bigger than any single species could ever achieve. Rivera smiled as he watched Alliance ships from dozens of species working together to rebuild worlds that had been devastated by war. "That's what humans do best, Sarah. We build things that last, and this alliance, this partnership between species, who choose cooperation over conflict, this is going to last for a very long time." The memorial service for the human crew members who had died in the war was held on Luna Base, where the journey had begun 3 years earlier. Representatives from every Alliance species attended, paying their respects to the beings who had traveled impossible distances to fight for people they had never met. Commander Lyrics delivered the primary eulogy, his words translated into dozens of languages and broadcast across the galaxy. "The humans came when we called," he said simply. "Not for profit, not for conquest, not for glory, but because it was right. They showed us that intelligence without compassion is meaningless, that technology without wisdom is worthless, and that strength without justice is nothing more than tyranny. The Galactic Freedom Alliance continued to grow, welcoming new species and exploring new regions of space. But its foundation remained the partnership between humanity and the Zephyrian Republic. Two species that had discovered that their differences made them stronger rather than weaker. Years later, when new threats emerged from unexplored regions of the galaxy, the Alliance was ready. They had learned that the universe was full of wonders and dangers, but that neither could overcome the power of beings willing to stand together in defense of freedom and justice. Admiral Rivera, now in his 60s but still commanding Alliance fleets, often reflected on the message that had started it all, a desperate call for help from beings who had never seen Earth, transmitted across impossible distances to a species that most of the galaxy considered mythical. Humanity had answered that call, and in doing so, had found their place among the stars. They were no longer alone in the universe, no longer isolated on their small blue world. They were part of something greater, something that would endure, long after the last human had returned to the dust of Earth. The legacy of the Deathworlders would live on in the alliance they had helped create, in the freedom they had fought to protect, and in the knowledge that somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, there were always beings willing to answer when others called for help. And in the depths of space, monitoring stations continued to listen for new signals, new calls for assistance from species not yet discovered, because humanity had learned the most important lesson of all, that the universe was too big and too dangerous for any species to face alone, but that together, there was no challenge that couldn't be overcome. The story of how Earth answered the call had become legend, told and retold on thousands of worlds. But for those who had lived it, who had fought and bled and died to make it real, it was something more than legend. It was proof that in a universe that often seemed cruel and indifferent, intelligence and compassion could still triumph over ignorance and hate. And that was a legacy worth fighting for, no matter how far from home the journey might lead.